There's something about a Scorpio man that people misunderstand. He's not just watching how men treat women, he's watching how women treat themselves. And when a woman in his life, a sister, a mother, a close friend, begins to shrink inside a relationship, when she stays while slowly disappearing, it doesn't register to him as love, loyalty, or patience. It registers as danger because Scorpio men don't see women as disposable, adaptable, or meant to endure. They see women as energetically sacred, intuitive, perceptive, powerful in ways that don't announce themselves. So when he watches a woman silence her intuition, negotiate her worth, or remain present while internally escaping, it unsettles him on a visceral level. Not because he wants to control her choices, but because he knows what it costs a woman to abandon herself. There are women who don't leave when they're unhappy. They float. They endure. They tell themselves they're being kind while slowly detaching from their own truth. And from a Scorpio man's perspective, that's not softness, that's slow erosion. This video isn't about judgment, it's about concern. Because when a Scorpio man becomes frustrated, distant, or uncharacteristically blunt, it's because he watched something sacred diminish and couldn't unsee it. Chapter 1: How Scorpio Men See the Feminine. A Scorpio man doesn't relate to women on a surface level. He never has. He doesn't just see personalities, roles, or titles. He senses energy, intuition, and emotional truth long before anything is spoken. To him, the feminine isn't fragile, it's potent. There's an unspoken understanding in Scorpio men that a woman's intuition is not decorative, it's diagnostic. It reads rooms, it detects dishonesty, it knows when something is off before the mind catches up. That's why Scorpio men don't respect women for how much they tolerate. They respect women for how clearly they listen to themselves. So when a woman is grounded in her truth, when she knows when to stay, when to leave, when to say no without apology, a Scorpio man feels at ease around her. He trusts her judgment. He trusts her instincts. He trusts that she will protect her own spirit. But when a woman begins to override that inner voice, when she talks herself out of what she knows, when she stays present while disconnecting internally, that's when concern sets in. Because to a Scorpio man, a woman who ignores her intuition isn't being selfless, she's being unprotected. And Scorpio men are acutely aware of how vulnerable the feminine becomes when it stops honoring itself. This is why Scorpio men are often more disturbed by self-betrayal than betrayal by others. They understand that once a woman starts abandoning herself, the relationship is already operating on borrowed time, whether she admits it or not. From his perspective, love isn't proven by endurance, it's proven by alignment. And any situation that requires a woman to disappear in order to stay was never meant to hold her in the first place. Chapter 2: Where Concern Turns into Frustration. At first, a Scorpio man watches quietly. He doesn't intervene, he doesn't lecture, he doesn't rush in to save anyone. Scorpio energy is patient, almost unnervingly so. He observes patterns, not moments. He listens for what isn't being said. He notices when laughter becomes thinner, when presence becomes obligatory, when a woman starts needing distance just to feel like herself again. Concern turns into frustration when he realizes this isn't a temporary phase, it's a self-abandonment pattern. From his perspective, the most unsettling part isn't that she's unhappy, it's that she knows she is and stays anyway. That's when the internal conflict begins for him. Because Scorpio men are wired to confront truth, not float around it. And watching someone they care about choose endurance over honesty feels like watching a slow motion betrayal, not of him, but of herself. This is also where people misread Scorpio men. They think he's being harsh, cold, judgmental. But what they're actually seeing is restraint breaking down. He's frustrated because he understands the long term cost of ignoring intuition. He knows that when a woman numbs herself to stay, resentment doesn't disappear, it mutates. It leaks into tone, touch, patience, and eventually into the body itself. And he knows that no amount of kindness can compensate for the damage of living out of alignment. So when a Scorpio man pulls back emotionally, when he becomes blunt instead of gentle, when he stops offering reassurance, it's often because he's reached the limit of watching something sacred erode without acknowledgement. In his mind, silence in the face of self betrayal isn't compassion, it's complicity. And Scorpio men don't stay complicit for long. Chapter 3: The Silent Sufferer Archetype. There is a certain type of woman a Scorpio man becomes deeply concerned about, not because she's weak, but because she's too willing to disappear. She doesn't fight, she doesn't demand, she doesn't explode, she endures. On the outside, she looks patient, accommodating, even loving. She shows up, she stays present, she tells herself that this is what emotional maturity looks like. But internally, she's already gone. She escapes in small, socially acceptable ways: distraction, overwork, sleep, fantasy, emotional detachment. She creates pockets of distance instead of making a decision. She learns how to survive the relationship rather than live inside it. From a Scorpio man's perspective, this is the most dangerous kind of suffering because no one is being told the truth, not the partner, and eventually, not even herself. What troubles him isn't that she's unsure of her feelings, it's that she keeps postponing the moment of honesty by numbing herself instead. She tells herself she's being compassionate. He sees her being absent. She believes she's sparing someone else's pain. He sees her slowly disconnecting from her own instincts. And Scorpio men are acutely aware of what happens when intuition is overridden long enough. It doesn't disappear, it turns into quiet resentment, emotional fatigue, and a loss of self that can take years to undo. This is why Scorpio men don't romanticize endurance. They don't admire suffering in silence. They don't see floating as strength. To them, love that requires self erasure isn't love, it's anesthesia. And watching a woman sedate her own truth in order to stay isn't something a Scorpio man can comfortably stand beside. Chapter 4: Why Scorpio Men Can't Stay Neutral. Scorpio men are often accused of being intense, opinionated, or emotionally intrusive. But what people don't understand is this: neutrality feels dishonest to Scorpio energy. When a Scorpio man sees a woman slowly abandoning herself, staying silent doesn't feel respectful, it feels like betrayal. Because once he sees it, he cannot unsee it. And Scorpio men take truth personally. He knows that if he stays quiet, he's validating a lie. He's watching harm unfold without acknowledgement. He's participating in a dynamic that rewards self erasure. That internal conflict is unbearable for him. So something has to give. This is why Scorpio men tend to respond in one of three ways. They speak up bluntly, uncomfortably, sometimes without softening the edges, not to wound, but to interrupt the illusion. They pull back emotionally, energetically, sometimes physically. Distance becomes a form of protest when words feel futile. They disengage altogether, not out of indifference, but out of refusal to normalize what they see as spiritual erosion. To outsiders, this can look cold. To the Scorpio man, it's containment, because he understands something many don't. You cannot rescue someone who won't choose themselves, and staying emotionally entangled while watching a woman diminish feels like violating something sacred. Scorpio men are not here to manage comfort. They are here to protect truth, and when truth is being slowly sedated, neutrality is no longer an option. Chapter 5: The Longest Walk Home. Whenever this topic comes to mind, one friend always stands out. We've known each other since middle school, back when the walk home from class felt like the longest, safest part of the day. We ran track together, shared quiet jokes during class, and grew up side by side through small, ordinary moments that somehow lingered longer than anything else. Even now, so much of who I am can still be traced back to those years when friendship was uncomplicated and constant. In her late 20s, she met a man on a dating app. By that point in our lives, we were both deep into our careers, so we only caught up once or twice a month. One afternoon, we met for coffee, and she casually mentioned him. "Oh, yeah," she said offhandedly. "I make him lunch. He doesn't really go anywhere, mostly just stays on his computer. He's been unemployed for about a year now." I started asking questions, the kind you ask when something doesn't sit right. "On the computer doing what?" "Why are you the one cooking when you work full time?" "Why are you always the one making the plans?" I knew her well. She was a huge foodie, an avid Yelp reviewer, always excited to try new places and experiences. None of this aligned with the person I knew. That night, the conversation stayed with me. She felt like a younger sister to me, and my intuition was loud. Months later, I learned through a mutual friend that the guy had crashed her car. Concerned, I reached out to her and asked if she needed help. Her workplace was on the way to mine, so I offered to give her rides if she needed them. When I picked her up, I made sure to leave early so we'd have time to talk. I asked her what was really going on. That's when she broke down. She burst into tears, deep, uncontrollable sobs. It was the loudest, most painful cry I had ever seen from her, and it's a moment I'll never forget. What she'd been telling me barely scratched the surface. Things were far worse than she'd let on. I'll stop there. If I'm being honest, I was deeply frustrated, not out of judgment, but fear. I had told her again and again, "You have to choose yourself. No one is coming to save you, not even me." As things continued to unravel, I found myself stepping in on her behalf and confronting her partner. What frustrated me most wasn't her loyalty to him, but watching her feel compelled to defend or excuse behavior that was plainly harmful when the facts themselves needed no interpretation. Eventually, we had a slow, quiet falling out, largely because of this situation and the man she was entangled with. Even now, from time to time, I still check in on her through mutual friends and social media. A part of me hopes she'll find this channel someday and realize I was never mad at her, and she's still a little sister to me. Chapter 6: What Scorpio Men Actually Hope For. Despite the intensity, Scorpio men are not hoping to be obeyed, followed, or deferred to. They're hoping for congruence. A Scorpio man feels safest around women who are aligned with themselves, not perfect, not certain, but honest. Women who listen when their body tightens, who don't talk themselves out of discomfort just to keep the peace, who don't confuse loyalty with self sacrifice. What Scorpio men actually admire is a woman who can say, "Something doesn't feel right, and I trust myself enough to pause, question, or walk away." That's not chaos to him, that's integrity. He doesn't need a woman to be fearless, he needs her to be faithful to her own truth. Because when a woman chooses herself, she doesn't need rescuing, convincing, or watching over. She becomes energetically sovereign, and Scorpio men deeply respect sovereignty. This is also why Scorpio men are drawn to women who have walked away from situations that diminish them, not because of the drama, but because of the clarity it required. To a Scorpio man, that clarity is sacred. So when he grows distant or concerned around women who endure instead of choose, it's not contempt, it's grief. Grief for the version of her that knew herself, grief for the intuition being ignored, grief for the truth being postponed. Because Scorpio men don't fall in love with illusions, they fall in love with what's real. And the greatest hope they hold for the women in their lives isn't that they stay, adjust, or endure. It's that they honor themselves even when it costs them something. Closing the Scorpio truth. A Scorpio man doesn't fear loss the way people think he does. What he fears is witnessing self betrayal and being asked to pretend it's love. Because once he sees a woman silencing her intuition, shrinking her needs, or disappearing internally just to keep something intact, something fundamental breaks in him too. Not trust, not affection, reverence. And Scorpio men cannot love without reverence. This is why they don't praise endurance, they don't romanticize suffering, they don't applaud loyalty that costs someone their soul. To them, a woman's self respect is not optional, it's the foundation. Her intuition is not negotiable, it's sacred. And any relationship that requires her to abandon herself was never a safe place to begin with. So when a Scorpio man becomes quiet, or distant, or painfully honest, it's not because he lacks compassion, it's because he refuses to call self erasure love. And the truth is, the women he respects the most are not the ones who stayed the longest. They're the ones who chose themselves before they disappeared completely.